This is the April meeting of Left 2 Retirement Board. At this time, I'd like to take a moment of silence for the brothers and sisters we've lost over the last month. Thank you very much. At this time, we have one action item, and that would be the approval of minutes. We're going to hold off on that for a little bit and go down to the legislative session debrief. Executive Director Nelson.
Yes, so to kick off the interim every year, we have a recap of session and a preview of coming attractions for the interim, if you will. No action is needed on either of these items. Jacob will be doing both of them, but to start with, this will be the session debrief. And with that, I'll turn it over to Jacob. Okay.
Jacob's muted.
Just turn the mic on, Jacob. Mic on.
There we go. Okay. Got multiple microphone and camera buttons to press. I think we're good. Okay. For the record, Jacob White, staff to the board. As Steve said, this is the legislative wrap up. And so you've been receiving emails from me all session, and we've been talking about this, most of these bills, so I won't go into too much detail on them. But first, the board's one bill this session did successfully pass and has been signed by the governor, and that's the no-cost interruptive military service credit bill that the board's been working on the last few years. Just as a reminder, this did expand no-cost interruptive military service credit to include service where a member earned an expeditionary medal. It will be effective in 90 days after the end of session, which is July 23rd. And I've been communicating with DRS. They're planning on assigning a project manager to it. As of last week, they had not done that yet, as they were waiting for a session to wrap up and to see what all their workload was before delegating that to their different project managers. So we'll continue to be in communication with them on next steps and provide the board any updates. Sorry, I found it. I'm losing my cursor. We've got like 4 screens my cursor can end up on, so it takes a while to get it centered. Okay, and then this was not a board-sponsored bill, but one we have discussed and that the board did study a few years ago, and that's tribal law enforcement left 2 eligibility. This bill did pass this session and was signed by the governor, House Bill 1481. The bill would allow tribes to enter into compacts with the state and for them and for tribal police officers to participate in Left 2. So this one's also effective 90 days after the end of session. However, there will be some other steps that need to occur before any tribes can join Left 2. They'll need to enter a compact with the state. And at this time, I did check in with Department of Retirement Systems, assuming that they will be the lead on negotiating or finalizing, drafting these compacts. However, the bill did put that responsibility with the governor's office. So there is an assumption in my discussions with DRS that they will end up being assigned that from the governor's office, but that has not occurred yet. We expect that there will be at least one tribe who's very interested in having its members join Left 2. And so just awaiting on them to reach out to the governor's office, and then the governor's office to reach out to DRS and possibly the Left 2 board on the next steps in that process. Then there was the operating budget. So when I wrote this slide, it had not yet passed, so there's not much detail here. But I know the most important thing to the board is that the plan was fully funded, that the appropriations did reflect the rates adopted by the board. And then also there were some provisions impacting Left 2 board staff, including general wage increases, a vaccine incentive payment of $1,000, and then there was another incentive payment for state employees of $1,000 for a retention bonus for state employees who had worked with the state over a certain time period. And then also I did check in with the DRS on their budget. Specifically, they had talked to the board last year about their decision package request for more FTEs, and that was tied in part to an increase in retirements they were seeing and some delay in how long it was taking them to process those retirements. And so they did receive all of the FTEs they had requested, which was about 17, 18 FTEs. And then, 17.7 FTEs. And then they also received an additional 1.8 employees for the implementation of the federal legislation, the Secure Act 2.0, which I'll talk a little bit more about in the next presentation I give. And then also DRS did receive about $34.5 million for its continued project to modernize the pension systems. The systems they currently use are, I know Steve likes to tell the story of how when he first started in pensions, he came in when the system was brand new, and so they're replacing those now.
Is that a way of calling me out for being rude? The systems need to be replaced, and the people that were around when the systems were being implemented, probably not.
I was trying to be nice and not. Okay. Steve likes to, when I pick on Steve about his technology, his ability to use computers, he reminds me that back then he promoted quickly because, in part, he was good with the new system.
Steve, we can see that your check engine light is on from here.
And then some legislation that did not pass that we were following, Senate Bill 5648 and its companion 1804 was regarding promotional firefighter positions and ensuring that those remain in left. And I see that Wolf has his hand raised.
Yeah, Jacob, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I think there's a reference to 1804 that might not be correct. 1804 did pass, but not as a companion on this issue. It's actually a bill that relates to PEB coverage for retirees and those with disabilities and makes it so that PEB coverage can continue even if a local governmental entity later opts out of PEB. So it does have some tangential meaning for us here because there are instances where our Left 2 covered employees are in PEB in certain local governments. And nowadays, if this is signed by the governor, the retiree or the disabled person would not have their access to PEB health benefits withdrawn if at a later point in time that local government opts out of PEB or is subsumed by another local government that doesn't do PEB, like what happened in Snohomish County between their Board of Health and the county government that triggered this bill. So,
I clearly transposed some numbers here. So I see I have 5648 and then 5468 below that. So I'll go back and correct the record on this later. I don't have the correct numbers in front of me, but I got something wrong here.
So Wolf, I hate, Jacob, I don't mean to step on you, but Wolf, are you saying that the bill did make it to the governor's desk?
Yeah, 1804 is on the governor's desk now,
okay.
And it is pertaining to PEB coverage for retirees and those with disabilities who, as I said, will maintain their access to purchase those benefits even if a local government later opts out. Under current law, that local government later opts out, the access for retirees is withdrawn. That's fixed in this bill.
Great, thanks. Thanks, Wolf. And Jacob, you probably knew that too, but.
Yeah, I got the wrong numbers. So the correct
No problem.
numbers were 5468, and then the companions 1279.
Okay,
And
Thank you, sir.
those bills did not pass.
Did
so
not
the,
pass.
the issue that Jacob was talking about regarding promotional firefighters,
right,
that still is unresolved.
correct.
Yes. Okay. Sorry about that.
That's okay. That's okay. That's why we have these briefings.
Yeah, so this bill, the intent behind it was that it would ensure that firefighters who promote don't end up in a situation where their position no longer qualifies for LEF. And this was an issue that the LEF 2 board staff had worked with DRS with over at least a year, and then just reached a point where DRS didn't feel it could update their rules in the way that we were requesting, and felt that it would take legislation. And so that in part was behind this piece of legislation. So the Senate version of the bill did pass through, received a vote and passed through Senate Ways and Means, but did not make it to the floor. And then the House version did not receive a hearing.
Okay, great.
And to clarify for the board too, that was not a LEF 2 board bill.
No.
So the board staff, we received notice from DRS after the last board meeting of the year. And so that bill was actually worked by the State Council of Firefighters, not by the LEF 2 board.
Okay,
And the issue there had to do with their current definition of how DRS interprets the definition of firefighter requires that people that have in their position description that firefighters have in their position description that there's at least a possibility that they end up fighting a fire.
Right. I remember I remember the days, and they're still there. But
Okay.
somebody goes into fire prevention, there was always an argument. Well, they don't fight fires anymore. Well, no, actually, if they do, they still have their bunker gear, and they're still considered a firefighter. But that's a whole different. We don't need to.
Okay.
We don't need to raise that again. We'll continue to do what needs to be done for that. But 1804 is the one that Wolf was talking about, which is not the same as the bill that we had on there, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So now we're on 5625?
Yes.
Okay.
And so this was a large, complex bill, so it's going to carry over to the next slide. But Senate Bill 5625 concerning public employee retirees. This bill did receive a hearing in Senate Ways and Means, but was not exec out, and there was no companion bill in the House. The bill created an ombudsman position at DRS, and then it had some additional items. And the ombudsman position at DRS handled retirement issues as well as some healthcare related issues.
Mm-hmm.
And then won't get into too much detail on all the different situations, the other items in that bill, but let me see. I guess I should say that there was a fiscal note, even though it did not get exec out, it did get a fiscal note that DRS, the Healthcare Authority, the AG's office, and OSA all did fiscal notes on it. And most of the costs were from Department of Retirement Systems, and it was going to cost around $1 million each biennium to create the ombudsman office. And then there was some cost associated with the other items, but most of the cost came from the creation of an ombuds office.
And this bill failed too, correct?
Yes, it did.
Isn't there an ombudsman we have through LNI right now?
Yes, and so the language of this bill did mirror what the LNI ombuds office looks like.
Okay.
There were some differences, but it was similar to that.
All right, just needs more work.
And then there were these additional items. Steve, do you want me to go into these? No. Okay. So I'll skip over these additional items because it gets pretty detailed pretty quick.
Yeah.
These were some of the issues that board staff had been working on in the interim. Right. And then when the bill came up, and I want to kind of, in the interest of transparency, and also make an apology if necessary. when Senator Leas contacted me about the bill and wanted to have some examples for why there would be an ombudsman. He knew that he was aware that there had been some issues that we'd been working on. And so I shared them with him and they all went in the bill.
Good.
None of those, though, had been approved by the board for legislation. So I don't want to get out in front of any of you on any of these items. And then we've been working on them over the interim with DRS. They were opposed to the bill during session. So I'll have to follow up with them and make sure that didn't get crossways with them and that we better understand what their issues are with each one of those topics, because they'll all be on the, at least potentially on the work plan for this interim that you guys will be considering in May and June.
Okay.
And then there were just a couple other bills of interest that we followed during session that I wanted to mention quickly. One was concerning flexible work schedules for general and limited authority peace officers. And so this bill went beyond a pension issue, but it did have an impact on LEF 2 in that it would allow part-time police officers to be members of LEF 2. So we did do an analysis of that. But that bill ended up not passing. And then also there was another bill that this one did not receive any hearings, and it was regarding the reemployment of employees who were separated from service due to not getting vaccinated during the vaccine mandate. And there were would have been some pension impacts with that bill too, but it did not receive a hearing. And I should add the flexible work schedules for law enforcement officers received hearings in the policy committees, but did not make it out of their the Senate or the House.
Okay. Any questions? Good job. Thanks, Jake. Oh, Wolf?
Sorry, I just wanted to add one other that may be of secondary interest to us, since it does not touch LEF 1 or LEF 2, but it was a significant change to PERS 1 and TERS 1 UAAL contribution rates. A bill did pass. It was OFM request legislation that will phase down the employer-paid UAAL contributions for both TERS 1 and PERS 1. Currently, those rates are at 3.85, and just for example, in the PERS 1 case for 2024, they go to 2.5 and then 2.0, 1.5, and 0.5% over the course of 4 years. TERS 1 goes down faster. For teacher retirement system, 0.5% in 2024, again in 25, and then 0 in each of 26 and 27. The official OFM dollars estimate is like dog choking wads of money saved by state government and local government here. There was no attempt to do a fiscal note for local government. I think the legislature is booking about $550 million plus, and most of that in their supplemental in employer contributions that they aren't going to make. Now, what they're doing here is taking up an actuary's report that shows that phase down is reasonable, given that we're getting close to where we're fully funded and don't need to keep contributions at that 3.85% rate for as long as people had thought. So bill passed, helps local governments. It's about $10 million for us at Pierce County alone, across all funds for a biennium. So this does start to help out on the margins. I would expect to see it help other local governments as well. But it, again, does not affect LEF 1 or LEF 2 contribution rates at all, because those are outside this picture.
Thanks, Wolf.
Okay, that wraps up that first presentation, unless there's any other questions.
Well, good job, Jacob. I appreciated the all the updates that you gave over the legislative time. So you proved why we have you, and I appreciate having you on the job. Keep up the good work.
Thank you.
So, segueing from the end of session, today is also the start of the interim. And one of the first topics for the board every interim is coming up with your work plan. What are you going to work on? In particular, what are you going to have us work on? Your work plan helps us plan our staffing levels and everything for the rest of the year. You know, who's going to be doing what. There's no action required today, but we wanted to give you a preview because there were some unresolved issues from session. There were a number of topics that you directed the staff to bring back to your attention next interim. Last interim, you told us that. Jacob mentioned there's been some federal changes. And then there's just some of the regular ongoing stuff that responsibilities of the board that come up every year or every other year. That's the point of this preview. If there are any questions, though, that you have on any of these items now, that's fair game. But the idea is that you'll get into each of these potential topics more in depth in May, and then adopt a work plan at the June meeting. And as you'll see, there's probably more on here, more potential stuff on here than there is the capacity to actually do it all this interim. So this will be we'll have to work with you guys to figure out which of these are priorities for you to help make all this happen. But today it's just sort of a sneak peek of everything that might be on your agenda. And with that, I'll turn it over to Jacob.
Okay. Once again, Jacob White, staff to the board. Yes, this one makes me a little nervous because there's a lot more pages of possible topics than previous years. So bear with me, and I won't go into too much detail on these. Like Steve said, we'll go in more detail next month. But yeah, if you have any questions, please stop me. So the first two here are carryover from last interim. The first one, for now, calling overpayment responsibility. And this had to do with an issue the board has looked at over the last few years about, first, the board passed a survivor window, an ability to change your survivor option within the first couple months of retiring. And then the board was looking at a second window for when there's a recalc done. And by the end of the last interim, the board had moved on to perhaps the underlying issue had more to do with who was that the member is responsible for paying an overpayment due to an employer error. And so the board wanted to look at that further about who should be responsible for that employer error. And then the second one is the benchmarking peer comparison. So after the passage of the benefit improvement, the board was interested in seeing how the plan now compares to other similar pension systems throughout the country. It had been a long time since the board had seen a similar comparison. And then this next one, number 3, the benefit improvement tiered multiplier date. So there was, when the board drafted that legislation, there was a decision that had to be made on a date that would differentiate between those who qualified for a choice between a lump sum and a tiered multiplier and those whose only option was the lump sum. And so the board, I think it was at least a couple months ago, received a letter asking that they reconsider that date of changing that date. And then number 4, the taxation of catastrophic disability benefits. This was an issue that came up from Department of Retirement Systems. They received advice from their tax counsel that this had been administered incorrectly and that they needed to, in certain situations, tax part of the catastrophic disability benefit, which previously had not been taxed. Yeah, I could go into detail about that one, but I'll skip that for now. And then another issue that was brought, was requested that the board look into this interim was a DROP plan, which is a deferred retirement option plan. If there's any questions about that, I can explain that and more, but otherwise I'll skip through that. And then number 6, I mentioned in my last presentation, the Secure Act 2.0, which was a very large and significant piece of federal legislation, which does have some impacts on, not so much on left 2, but on 457 and Roth and other pension related laws. Just to give you an idea how significant it was, I had some information here that it had over 90 or contains 90 provisions, 38 that impact governmental defined contribution plans. Some are mandatory, many are optional. The Department of Retirement Systems, we've been in communication with them on this and their plans for implementing. They've been working with their tax counsel and also talking to other states about their implementation plans. And they have assigned a project manager to it. And she's just beginning to unpack what's in store for her. And like I said, the DRS did also receive some FTE funding to assist them with implementing this.
Jacob?
Yeah.
This is Pat. I'm not sure if you thought you were going to get a question on this, but in that Act 2, wasn't there used to be a provision for public, I'm not sure if it was just firefighters or public safety officers, that $3,000 could be reduced from your taxable income due to the fact that I think it's just firefighters, but you had to have that deduction had to be directly related to your pension through DRS to get the $3,000. And in the 2.0, didn't they remove that? And that now allows just a reduction of $2,000 or $3,000 from your income tax.
I'm going to ask Tim to help out because he has been going to presentation after presentation on this issue.
That's kind of the Reader's Digest, but I thought that's one of the major things. It seems minimum, but it's kind of a major thing to get the $3,000.
Yeah, you are correct, Pat. The original tax provisions came from the 2006 Pension Protection Act, which allowed the $3,000 deduction element if it was, paid out of your retirement fund. There's a lot of elements or moving parts to it. And in this recent legislation, you are correct. There were modifications to that. It still affects public safety, but it removes a lot of the extra steps and everything that has to go into it to qualify for that deduction. So.
Okay, and I don't know, Tim, whether it would help. Maybe offline we'll do something, or maybe the staff will work on it. But get that out to. Does it affect both police and fire, or just fire?
Both.
It does do both. Okay, and of course the tax season's over, and I'm not sure how many people knew that they could do that, but I think if we get it out, they can modify their tax returns the next time out. But I talked to a lot of people, and those are the things I remember when we did the first one, and not a lot of people knew how it worked. And now that we made that the feds made the 2.0, I think more of our members will be able to use that to reduce their taxable income, hopefully next year.
Yeah, and I'll double check the implementation date because I want to say it's a 24 implementation date, but I have some information on that. It is something that I talk a lot about with members when we go out and do outreach. So certainly we'll have all our information updated for the next time that we're communicating. I'm certain we'll find other ways to communicate that out to members.
Thanks, Tim. I knew you guys were on it. I just wanted to remind some people that are out there now that there was a provision in there to help us, so that's good.
Okay, so I'm going to move on. The next slide are benefit topics that the board could consider that were included in bills that did not pass this session. And so I just talked about most of these, and I've got the
look at that.
hopefully the correct bill number next to it. Maybe I don't. I do. Here, I got it right. So we got the firefighter definition bill. And then this rest of this list is from the ombuds bill and the other issues. So ombuds is not included on here, but the other issues raised in that bill are that Steve briefly talked about.
Okay.
And then we have actuarial topics, long-term economic assumptions and report on financial condition. And then number 2, the off-cycle actuarial valuation report results. And those are standard ones for this year. And then the third one was a letter the board received from the state actuary regarding request legislation. And it's to update their statutes to reflect their current practices. So my understanding is that someone from the state actuary's office would come and speak to the board on that. Yeah.
Holy moly.
Quick question. I didn't notice, is it 1413 and 5424? I didn't see that on there. Is that's around the flexible work schedules?
Yeah. The flexible work schedule bill is interesting, and we can talk about that if you want. Most of the issues that came up with that had to do with what I call the HR pieces of that bill. The pension piece, the statutes are already set up to allow for partial service credit and for treating your final average salary. So I don't know that anything needed to change other than the one requirement that half-time or part-time employees could be in left. There weren't any other issues that got at least pension related that came up in the hearings on the bill. It seemed to be more related to bargaining issues, seniority issues, and some of those kind of things that are outside of the board's purview. But if there are, particularly if there are pension pieces that didn't get discussed, but that are a discussion would be helpful for, that we could revisit that.
Thanks. I mean, the halftime piece is kind of a big one. How does that, how have we discussed that in the past?
That piece has never been talked about by the board. So it was full-time from always. And we could do at least a briefing on that about what issues would be created, especially pension issues, by moving to part-time. It's come up, that topic has come up at least 3 times since I've been the director. I know that's a really, really long time, Jacob, but yeah, so it does pop up periodically.
Mr. Chair, just to comment on that. Senator Lovick was the driver behind the bill, and the way the bill was originally configured, it was a 1,000-pound bomb, in a china shop. I mean, it was, and so I'm number 2 on the bill to help him vet several of the issues out there that would eliminate a lot of the damage, collateral damage that would have been done by the bill. Didn't get much play time. I expect he'll probably run it again, zombie status as we speak. So I mean, it just there's 2 or 3 different ways this could come back into play, depending. But the point is this is driven by state patrol needs, and we're kind of swept up in it. We're talking to the director of the state patrol during committee this year. Ask him directly in transportation if we gave you more academies, would it help you accelerate the replenishment of the loss ratio that you're experiencing? And he said no, he said, we can't actually get the candidates in play. So this is, rather than fulfilling on the front end, this is attempting to stop on the back end some of the bleeding that's going on in an attempt to conserve the current resources they have. Quite frankly, you're aware with Monica putting together the regional criminal justice training academies out there that we have a bunch of people in the pipeline for local and county departments at this point that are trying to get queued up and meet their 6 months on the street in the academy requirement that we've been able to do the last couple of years. So this is kind of a really narrow application that sort of expanded to fill a lot more than was expected on that. Although I'm with Representative Bergquist, it's probably not a bad discussion to have. I think this thing's going to continue to have legs.
So Senator Holy, you're looking for us to add that to our list?
Yeah, I think that'd be a good idea.
We'll put it on the list of things that you'll be going over in May, and you can just start chewing on which ones you've got time for and which ones are the higher priorities. Okay. So I appreciate the explanation, Senator Holy. And I know that bill kind of got wrapped up by in the need to discuss a drop plan, because again, by the Fraternal Order of Police, they're the ones who sent in the letter asking the board to look at drop, because they both were touching on the same subject of trying to find ways to keep law enforcement officers from leaving once they were in membership. So there's a bigger topic that this is two different approaches to looking at the same issue.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it's so yeah, let's go ahead and put it on the list and make sure that we have it.
Okay, will do.
Thank you.
Then we're through the actuarial topics, and then on to administrative. So another typo here, it's 2024 meeting calendar number 6, so I had the wrong year there. And then these are all the general ones that the board always has, except for number 10 and 11. And so those both came out of the board's strategic planning last interim. And so number 10 is succession planning, and 11 is recruitment, retention, and salary setting structure for staff. So any questions on the admin topics? No. Okay, and then as Steve said at the beginning, the next steps for the work plan, May meeting we'll discuss in more detail, and then June the board may choose to vote to adopt the interim work plan at that time. And that completes my presentation. There's no other questions. Thank you.
Seeing no further questions, Steve?
The administrative update is fairly brief at this point in time. The State Council of Firefighters had their educational conference recently. The board did not have a table there like we normally do to answer questions. And so I wanted to make sure you were aware of that. Coming up next month, Walk Cops will have their spring meeting, and we will have somebody there to kind of discuss the same thing that Jacob did, the interim preview, what kind of potential topics are out there for that the board could be looking at this interim, and answer questions about last session. That's coming up in May. Other than that, I did not have anything for the administrative update at this time, unless you have any questions.
Any board members have any questions for Steve or any comments? Seeing none, we will do the minutes, put it back on the agenda for May. Is that correct?
Correct. And the next meeting is May 17th. So we'll be working to make sure with board members that we'll have a quorum at that time.
I think that May 17th is Is that a week early from what we usually do?
It is, yes.
Okay. Everybody notice that?
I can't remember which conference it was, but that was rescheduled to work around something when the board considered it. Which one?
There's about there was about 2 or 3, one for police and one for fire and one for the left board. So
yeah,
I think we're missing a lot of people. So okay. Seeing
Mr. Chair.
nothing. Yes,
Mr. Chair. Quick question for you. So I'll just note for the record that the Left 2 website does include a provision for public comment for board meetings.
Oh, yes.
And to submit those by email to reception@left.wa.gov. And I just wanted to ask the staff whether or not any such comments had been received for the record and distributed prior to the conclusion of the meeting.
No, the only comment that we received leading up to this meeting had to do with the topic that was discussed by Jacob regarding changing the date on the benefit improvement account. They wanted to make sure that their letter had been distributed to board members and whether the topic would be included in the kind of the summary of all the potential topics. I told them that it would, and it was.
Excellent. Thank you very much for the clarification. Just want to get that on the record.
Was that our AG that was
Yes.
reminding us to do certain work that they didn't allow me to try and put it in there first?
It was.
All right. I guess that's what we're just going to have to deal with from now on. So thanks, Torp. Anything else? Anything else to come before the board? Seeing none. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All right. Moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, hang around and talk to Steve. Thank you, guys. That would appreciate the updates, and we'll see you on May 17th.